welcome to Turkey Shorts, a new initiative to have timely and short conversations about all things related to Turkish politics here in Washington, D.C. and beyond. My name is Sinan Ciddi. I am an FTD Senior Fellow on Turkey, and this is our first and inaugural event on this. And I'm delighted that my good friend and colleague, Stephen Cook, has not let me down to be our test case for this. So thank you for Stephen and welcome.
It's a pleasure to be your guinea pig, Sinan.
Well, Stephen needs no introduction, but just for the record, he is the Eni Enrio Matei Senior Fellow for the Middle East and Africa Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations, and he has been following Turkey for a long, long time. So we're delighted to have him. So, Stephen, first up. So, and our first topic, I should mention our first conversation topic is Israel and Turkey, which right now seems to be extremely topical. People are asking lots of questions. Yeah, absolutely. We have 3 questions on this that we sort of determined was going to be a good idea. So, there was this sort of normalization of ties between Turkey and Israel for some time now. And since October 7, it seems to have essentially gone to hell, really. So what happened?
Well, look, this was entirely predictable, and those of us communicated to the Israelis that knew it was entirely predictable, communicated to the Israelis that as soon as Erdogan's political needs changed, they were likely to be back in the crosshairs. Now, the normalization of ties was part of a broader effort to normalize Turkey's ties with the Middle East. A whole host of countries in which whose relations with Turkey had deteriorated for the previous decade: the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and of course Israel. And much of this was driven by the fact that President Erdogan had driven the Turkish economy into the ground, and by improving relations with those countries, he felt that either one, he could tap into sovereign wealth funds, or garner goodwill in the West that would allow him to do things that would help him improve the economy, namely in the area of foreign investment. But of course, once this war kicked off and the Israelis undertook their military operations in the Gaza Strip, Erdogan immediately dropped the idea of normalizing Israel and essentially made Israel an enemy state. He was both pushed by his own ideological convictions about Jews and Israel and Zionism, as well as the fact that he does face criticism from his Islamist right that he hasn't been tough enough on Israel. And we see this in the manifestation of halting trade between the two countries and his grotesque rhetoric equating Israelis, but particularly Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, with Hitler. In fact, at one point he said that Netanyahu was worse than Hitler.
Right. Lots of memes have come out about that, and that's no joke. But he seems to have taken it further of late, right? And this is why I thought of doing the first one on this issue, simply because what we've seen in less than 7 days is we've seen reports, Erdogan talking to parliamentarians in Turkey, basically suggesting that at any moment, as he threatened the Greeks a couple of years ago, that they could enter Israel, which was widely interpreted to be as an invasion threat of Israel. So what changed after October 7th to such that the vitriolic rhetoric seems to essentially have gone to this threat of invasion? Is it just bluster, or do we think actually mean something out of this?
I think it's mostly bluster. Erdogan, in addition to being pushed from his opponents on doing more about the Palestinians, especially since he and members of his family have been involved in trade with Israel, I think Erdogan, there's 2 other things that are going on here. I think he does feel genuine solidarity with Palestinians, and particularly Palestinians who are suffering. But also, there is this kind of strange, weird yen that AKP officials have for Hamas, a terrorist organization. But nevertheless, they see Hamas themselves in Hamas and Hamas in themselves, which is entirely weird, given the AKP has never engaged in any kind of violence. And then I think that this is just a kind of posturing because the Turks have been left out of ceasefire negotiations and all of the dealings that's going on within the region to try to reestablish stability and bring a ceasefire. This has been an American, Qatari, and Egyptian show, and the Turks have been left out. And for all the reasons that one would expect, he was left out. His rhetoric has been bad. He's been very tough on the Israelis. People don't trust him. So he is outside the tent, and pardon me, but there's no other ways to put it, and pissing in. And this is the way he is doing it. And he has gone to Netanyahu is worse than Hitler, and now the next step is to threaten Israel with invasion, which is highly, highly unlikely.
And it seems to get me, going further off kilter right now. I mean, with the killing of Ismail Haniyeh, the political chief of Hamas, that's obviously caused some consternation and sort of eyebrow raising across the region, but across the world. But we should also remember that Haniyeh was a close associate and confidant of Erdogan. I mean, the guy had a Turkish passport. He lived locally in Turkey for a while when he wasn't in Qatar or Iran or wherever else he traveled. But, things are actually getting to more than a point of possibly bluff and bluster, because what we're now seeing is obviously with the Haniyeh's assassination, heightened concerns that Iran may actually retaliate against Israel militarily. And that's that, if we see that, I mean, what is your view that, what Turkey's position with this on me, given that it is so anti-Israeli? And on the one hand, if we see escalated kinetic conflict between the Israelis and the Iranians, what will Turkey do other than just denounce Israel?
I don't see any way in which the Turks join the fray kinetically, but of course, rhetorically, I think we can expect that they would support the Iranians and blame the Israelis for bringing whatever the Iranians do on themselves by killing Ismail Haniyeh. Of course, the killing of Ismail Haniyeh, as well as other Hamas leaders, as well as the daylight raid on the port of Hodeidah, as well as the killing of Hassan Nasrallah's military advisor, Fouad Shukr, in Lebanon, all of those things are intended to send very, very strong messages to Israel's regional adversaries that despite being back on their heels after the October 7th attacks, Israel has tremendous capability to do a lot of damage. And when you talk about Israel's adversaries, you now have to include Turkey in that group of countries and non-state actors.
Well, lots going on, and I'm sure we'll have more to talk about downstream. Let's hope that your predictions of Turkey not being sucked into a regional conflict will be proven true. Thank you for humoring us on our first attempt at this, and we'll see you next time, folks. Thank you.
Thanks, Sinan.